Hi, this is Scott. My 577 oral presentation. We're on slide 4. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the technologies required for the smart grid. One of them is electricity storage, and then the other part of that is really where a lot of the challenges is for the smart grid is how are you going to build this distributed system? So there are a lot of issues. You have to be able to control the grid without security concerns. Certainly, if you're going to have the ability to have the computing systems from a nuclear reactor accessible remotely, I don't know if you'd ever want to really do that, but if you were, certainly that would be a big security concern because someone would be able to potentially cause problems at that generator, that nuclear reactor. So there's one concern. Then you have all of the private information for all of the individuals, all of their business information, all of the homes. You could have thieves looking at electrical consumption information, understand which house to break into because you can tell when people aren't home. And then you have to have the ability to transfer between many different trusted nodes. The issue there is that you have a lot of different systems that just don't simply have the need to know all of the information being transmitted. And in fact, that's necessary because you're going to have competitors operating on the grid. You're going to have different corporations which are producing power on the grid, and they don't want their competitors knowing all of their data. So you really do need a good way to share, but only share with those that you want to share with those that you trust. And some of the other issues are speed and throughput. The system has to be very fast, and yet it has to be able to not have it's got to be able to carry a large amount of data. And then you've got scalability concerns. It's got to be scalable to thousands or millions of devices. It's got to have flexibility in purpose and trust, meaning that people are going to move around, systems are going to move around. You're going to have some systems which are going to share some of their information with in different systems, but not all of it. And you need to be able to manage all of that. And then the system has to be information rich from meter to power plant, which is just the opposite of what we have now. Right now, we have essentially a dumb grid. I mean, you have, for the most part, very little control information, very little information about consumption going all the way back. And in fact, you don't have information at one a substation. You don't have information about the substation 2 miles away, what's going on there. The system isn't really connected in that way. And the other issue is that where you do have information, it's all routed back to central control rooms, which is a challenge and really isn't using the power of distributed systems. So that was slide 4. Let's go to slide 5. So this is an example of the current grid. What you can see there is that you do have some information flowing back from field devices to substations to the control room, but you can see that it's all hierarchical. And so what you have is you don't have the ability to share information between different substations. If the guy in the control room isn't paying attention, doesn't adjust, reroute power, then the system goes down. Or if he doesn't understand what's going on, it's not really very automated either. And the other problem is that you have a lot of leased lines or dedicated lines for information to travel along the grid, and that is very inefficient. So here's slide 6 now. Just a summary of the current grid. It's hierarchical and design in nature. It's hard-coded and inflexible. It has dedicated communication channels. Has no ability to resist compromise. And meaning that if someone gets into the control room who shouldn't be there, they can shut down the grid. The system itself isn't intelligent enough to say, that's not what you're asking me to do isn't the right thing. And then it's inflexible to adjust supply with demand. So that was slide 6. Let's go to slide 7. What are some of the future grid requirements? Well, as I already mentioned, you have advanced communication requirements, about supply, demand and supply, and that's required for integrated green technologies. As part of this uh, getting ready to do this presentation and doing my paper, I read a lot of different literature, and I guess the grid right now is in the neighborhood of 30 or percent, something like that. It wasn't really the focus for the study, so I didn't document the number. But the government has done studies, and they've said even if we put up uh, you know uh, wind, ability to harness wind turbines even if we were put solar panels in every house, it with a system by its very design is too inflexible to allow for the kind of a variation that occurs with renewable sources. I mean, some days it's windy, you get a lot of good electricity, and other days you're not. And the problem is that as you rely more and more on such a power grid that is so you know unpredictable, you really the current grid can't support it. So that's a real challenge. And then we need robust methods to transmit monitoring and automation control messages, and we also need the ability uh, to put some intelligence in the control mechanisms, because what's happening right now is a lot of blackouts are, I guess, caused by yeah, actually a combination of operator error and some sort of fairly predictable event, like sometimes power lines are going to go down. That's in bad storms that's going to happen. And what you don't want to do is you want to keep that failure localized. And what happened in many cases is we had a cascading effect across the grid because the operator didn't properly contain the issue. And then this other issue is that in order to really support the kind of flexibility that we need in the grid, we have to be able to take measurements across the a grid and then transmit every 2 seconds or faster all of that information about the voltage and about the current and the phase of the power at any point. And that's a lot of information, very quickly being transmitted around a very wide area, and that information is required to be able to monitor the electrical grid. So I'm going to go stop here, and we'll go on to the next slide.